another exciting episode of the Masters Muscle Podcast. Let me just say, Vin, we're almost all in the same age bracket, and growing up, our guest was my voice of bodybuilding. But without any further ado, please introduce the man of the hour.
Yes, absolutely. So Tom Terwilliger was the voice of Muscle Sport USA, and he did all the shows. And back then we didn't have the social media platforms we have today, and the shows would come on. Was it monthly or weekly? I can't remember. But and his voice stood out, and it was just you couldn't wait to hear Tom's voice because you knew he was going to have a good show and feature all the shows. Tom, before we get into it a little bit, I just want to say that we're going back to, I think it was 87 or 88. I don't remember what gym it was in. I don't know if it was in New Jersey or it was in New York. And you were one of the first people I saw had a picture in a frame on a wall at a gym. And I don't remember every detail of it, but I remember talking to the gym owner, and he was telling me that's Tom Terwilliger. He's a light heavyweight. And he's a former teen competitor. He did the teen Colonial America, and he won the Junior USA. And that was the moment I knew I want to do that. And I went into the Colonial America myself. I took second place in the lightweight class, and I ended up winning the Junior USA. So we have that little connection you didn't know about.
Wow.
And the last time you and I spoke was on stage at either a Jersey show. We were sitting you and I just talking, bullshitting, and you were telling me how revved up you were to train for, I think it was the Night of the Champions. How that was the goal and everything. So, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, everyone. Tom Terwilliger.
Awesome. Well, number one, let me say I'm honored to be here, Sean. Vinny. I mean, you guys. I'm a big fan of the show. You guys are rocking it already, which I think is so fantastic. And it's just like Vinny. I'm like, you've been entering these Masters divisions competitions, gaining all this press, gaining all this admiration and coverage, and boom, you come out with a podcast. It is brilliant marketing. Oh. It's fantastic, and I'm thrilled to death to be part of it. And I just want to thank everyone who's tuned in, who's watching, and I appreciate it. I hope I can share some words of wisdom. If not, at least a couple, like Vinny and I were doing on stage that time, just bullshit.
Yep.
So bullshitting around, man.
How did you get into competing? How did that transition you into Muscle Sport USA? And then we'll go into what you're doing today.
Yeah, it was interesting because I had started competing, of course, around the whole metropolitan area. And I was competing as a teenager in New York, some teenage shows actually in New Jersey, the Colonial America. I'm trying to remember which other ones I did. There was a teenage metropolitan that I won as a teenager, which was a big show. It was like the New York Metropolitan Championship as a teenager, particularly as an open class winner. Guys like Chris Dickerson, Dennis Tenorino, a whole bunch of guys that really went on to win Mr. Universe and Mr. America, won that competition. So winning it as a teenager against the likes, I might add, of John Defendez, who is now Mr. USA, won the USA several years ago. And you can't miss John Defendez on social media. He's just about all over the place, right? And I still love the guy. We're dear friends today. But I started as a teenager. Really, it was interesting because I had a lot of challenges. Like when I was growing up, I'm an identical twin. And growing up, I was dyslexic, hyperactive, ADD, as they would define it today, and put into the special ed class in 4th grade. So that's sort of like created this stigma in my own mind. It was in many respects, and I remember the actual moment being put into special class, separated from my friends, right up to the 4th grade. So the 5th grade began that special ed education thing. Arriving to school in the little yellow bus, leaving in the little yellow bus, was somewhat traumatic. But I specifically remember, like, my best friend. She was a girl, tall, redheaded girl, Diane. And I remember we used to play records, those little 45s, Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog, all these old songs, right? All the bubblegum music of the 60s. And we would go on her deck and we would play that music. And I remember one day I was approaching her house after I'd been put in the special ed class. And she came running out. She says, I'm not playing with you anymore. You're a retard. Go away.
Oh,
Jeez.
Dude, that was traumatic. And it immediately, created this neural pathway that I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm stupid, all this stuff that I had to wrestle with for many, many years going past that. So for me, the way I wrestled with that was becoming, because you can imagine, in the special ed class, and it was truly, whether I belonged there or not, there were several individuals that truly had special defects and or learning disabilities and challenges that they were working with. So you can imagine there was no shortage of bullies when you're in the special ed class. No shortage. So my brother and I were going through the same experience, exact same experience, different classes, both special ed. And we became what was called the bully killers. And we, because we had already, even at 8 years old, I started studying Chinese Kung Fu with Grandmaster Alan Lee. And I had been doing that for a couple of years already and continued that right into the teen years. So we were pretty good at Kung Fu. Nobody did Kung Fu in 5th grade, except maybe Bruce Lee and a few others, So it was easy to be the bully killer and to take these bullies out and teach them a lesson, So that was all very negative programming. The only thing that was really positive was my family life. I had great parents. I had older brothers and sisters, and the Kung Fu studies. But then I remember in junior high school, and this is after I'd been already in so much trouble. I was constantly with the law and the authorities in school, constantly in trouble. A friend of mine came to my locker one time, come running up. I see bolting up. This is a kid I was playing lacrosse with. And he said, check this out. And he opens and he just shows me the cover of Muscle Builder magazine, which today is Muscle and Fitness, right? Remember that? Muscle Builder.
Yep.
And on the cover was this guy, and he's doing curls. He got this thing called, it was the arm blaster. If you remember the arm blaster, it was like you locked your arms in, and he's doing curls, and the big split in his teeth. I had no idea who this guy was. I'm flipping through the pages. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm looking at these black and white pictures of Frank Zane and Franco Columba, and of course it was Arnold Schwarzenegger on the cover. And that lit the fire almost immediately. That was it for me. I was completely magnetized to bodybuilding. I stopped playing lacrosse. I joined a local gym, which was okay, but then it wasn't long before I discovered a real gym not far from my neighborhood. So that's kind of how it started. It was rough beginnings, and I needed something to latch on that was positive, that would have a positive influence on my psyche, my emotions, and my physiology as much as anything else. And bodybuilding was the beginning of that for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. So did you have a mentor, a coach, if you will, or how did you get directed into what contest was going to be your first show?
That's probably one of the best questions you could have asked, because I think that's so important for anyone listening. I don't care if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or if you're a teenager just getting started. Having and finding a mentor in anything that you want to excel in is exceedingly important. It's vital, really, in terms of shortcutting it, because you're going to run into so many stumbling blocks, so many landmines, that it could wind up being frustrating, discouraging. You're not making progress, and you wind up quitting. So having a mentor who's been there, done that, and can kind of not necessarily hold your hand through the process, but guide you through the process is so important. So with that long-winded introduction, there was Tony Pandolfo. And Tony Pandolfo, when I said I belonged to some gym, it was called the Iron Masters. It was by my high school. And it was okay. It was decent equipment. It had a couple of universal machines and some barbells, some dumbbells. And it was all the kids trained there, But then I'd gotten wind. I'd heard about this other gym that was several miles away in Amityville. And they were like, oh, this place, man, Future Man Gym. You've got to check this out. It's like, this is where all the top guys in New York train. All the top bodybuilders are down there. But don't even go. Don't even think about it. Because they will eat you up and spit you out. I was like, holy crap. They had me scared, excuse my language, shitless to even go to this place. So I did. I rode my bicycle down there. I guess I was about 15 at the time. I ride my bicycle down there, and it was freezing cold. It was probably in February. And there's steam on the window. I'm trying to rub the steam off. Little do I know, the steam's on the inside, dummy. I'm like, it's not coming off. I can't look in. I'm like trying to look in. So finally, I had to find the courage to walk through the door. And as I walked through the door, the first thing that hits me, and you guys might remember this, Vinny, you're a little younger, but you might remember some of those old school in Jersey. There was Diamond Gym. There was Strong and Shapely. There were several gyms that had that old school flair, and this one was completely old school bodybuilding. And the first thing you smell when you went in was this like blend, this aromatic punch in the face, sweat, vomit, and Bengay. It was like that. Imagine mixing that up, and then it would wake you up if you were unconscious. But it almost knocked me out. It was like hit me in the face. I was like, "Holy crap!" So then I find the courage to kind of walk through the place, and there was Mr. America, Steve Maholic, being photographed. Yeah, Steve Maholic, legendary at the time. Unfortunately, he's gone to rest as well. But Steve was doing squats, and Steve dressed, by the way, and you remember some of the old school outfits, right? Like Robbie Robinson in Venice Beach, California. He always had the tattered, torn, looked like it never been washed tank top, holes everywhere, sweat stained. I mean, just a mess. And the big baggy sweatpants with the brown stained butt belt cinched as tight. It looked like Sinbad. It was like Sinbad. It was like the waist was like this, And here he is, and he's over there squatting. For me, I couldn't believe. I saw it in the magazines, but I couldn't believe a human being could look like this. I was like, it just blew me away, right? But that was also the time when I met my mentor, because at the time, the gym, Future Man, was owned by a gentleman named Tony Pandolfo. And Tony Pandolfo couldn't have been maybe 5'5", every bit as wide as he was tall, and he owned the club. So he introduced himself. He was very nice. He showed me around. And it wasn't like the kids said. They didn't want to eat me up and spit me out. He welcomed me. I guess, when you own a gym, you welcome anyone who can pay.
Yep. Of course.
Even if he looks like a punk-ass kid you want to get rid of in a couple of months, So Tony really kind of, once I joined, and I had to ride my bicycle there every day. So that was part of the workout. It was about 10 miles away. And but Tony took me under his wing. When he saw, like you guys, I'm sure once you see someone, even me, I see someone in the gym who I see frequently, they're pretty serious. They're really making an effort, but they're making a couple of mistakes here and there. I won't necessarily take them under the wing because that takes a tremendous amount of time and energy, but I will help them a little bit, like correct them. Hey, do you mind some feedback? That's what Tony started doing, but he saw that I was serious. I was there every day. And like every teenager today, I didn't want to rest. I had to train 7 days a week.
Sure.
And so yeah, all right. So Tony's like, "What are you doing, kid?" I said, I'm training. He goes, "You've been here for the last 14 days in a row." He goes, "Get your ass out of here, man. You got to." And then he started mentoring me. And Tony became, a tremendous, because he was also a champion bodybuilder himself, been there, done that. And one of the things I loved about Tony as a mentor too, he was smart, he was ethical, he steered me away from any kind of chemical use at that time. I'm a teenager. He knew this would not be good for me. So he steered me away from that and got me on nutrition and got me on the proper training, plenty of rest. But one of the things I also loved about Tony is he never looked like a gym rat, never, unless he was training. That guy he looked like he was going to the disco every time he was working in the gym. The perfectly pressed slacks, remember the high-waisted 70s disco slacks?
Oh, yeah.
Like the satin shirt, wide lapel, button down to here with his pecs hanging out. I mean, the guy always looked impeccable. And it was just like, he was a fantastic mentor. And it just led me right down the right path, man. Great question.
Very cool.
So,
very cool.
Tom, when you were growing up, what were you lean and lanky? Were you kind of built, or like playing lacrosse? What was your physique like before you started lifting?
Skinny. I was as skinny as you can imagine. In fact, a funny story around that. And after I had an article written in Muscle and Fitness magazine called "Chicken Legs," about my leg training, I was like, damn, I even mentioned her name. So there was a girl in junior high school named Miranda that I had a tremendous crush on, right? And in high school back then, there was like one big gym room, and the girls were on one side and the boys were on the other. And back then, of course, you had those, they had these like little skimpy, baggy gray shorts that had whatever school name written on it, and the baggy, the t-shirt, the gray. It was all gray. Everything was gray. And we had those, little Converse sneakers if you were lucky to be able to afford the Converse sneakers. And my legs were so skinny. I remember specifically, I had a crush on her, and she's like waving me over. She's with her girlfriends, and they're all giggling, And this is fifth grade. and she's flagging me over. And I get close enough, and she starts pointing. She says, "I see. I told you had chicken legs." I was like, another blow at that time. I was like, oh God.
Tom, please tell me your high school years were better than your elementary years.
High school was a challenge. It really was. Yeah. It was. Again, I was in a lot of trouble. I managed to work my way out of the special ed class, right back into the normal class, right back into trouble. I was still a bully killer, and still in all sorts of trouble. My martial arts, I never really embraced the Kung Fu philosophy, which is much more passive and Buddhist in its style. I was always more aggressive, which didn't serve me at all. But in high school, as a sophomore, I got my first Harley Davidson motorcycle. It was a chopper. It was a 1958 panhead, rigid frame chopper, big ape hangers, no brake on the front. It was a badass little scooter, you know. And nobody had Harley Davidson chopper in high school, so there's nobody to ride with, right? So I started hanging out with a whole. I started riding around Manhattan, just looking for. It was fun riding around Manhattan because you could hear the echo and the reverb of the loud straight pipe ball bouncing off the buildings. It was loud as hell, probably waking everybody up. And then I came across a bar in Manhattan that had about 10, 12, 15 bikes in front of it, some badass looking choppers. So I went in. Here I am. I'm 17 years old, you know. So I go into this place, and that's where I met and started hanging out with probably, as I look back, certainly the wrong crowd. I mean, these were authentic outlaw bikers. For that, so I dropped out of bodybuilding around that time. I had just won the Metropolitan, the Suburban, and a couple other big shows as a Teenage USA, and dropped out to ride my bike. But here's the reason I really dropped out. It had nothing to do with the bike. The bike was a catalyst, you might say. And this goes to the psyche. And this is the stuff that I write about and I like embrace today in terms of coaching people, is getting past those early traumas and the beliefs that we develop about ourselves, because we can make progress. I was making progress. I started seeing little pictures of myself in Iron Man. Remember old Iron Man magazine? Mm-hmm. I started seeing little pictures of oh my God, there I am from the colonial American. It was like a big deal. If you had a little picture of yourself in a magazine, it was like a huge deal, you know, as a teenager. And so I was starting to develop this new belief that, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not stupid. Maybe I'm not a 1%er. Maybe I'm not like maybe I can be normal. Maybe I can be a champion. Maybe I can be good. Right. And then something came along that just gave kibosh that. It was like, no, that's not who you are. You're this guy, remember? You're the guy who fights all the time. You're the guy who does this. You're the guy who can't read. You're the guy who blah, blah, blah. Whatever that belief system was, it interrupted whatever was starting to happen as a result of winning bodybuilding championships and taking a much better, more positive direction in my life. It's suddenly, as I got that Harley Davidson, that all suddenly came crashing in. And the old belief system reestablished itself. So I started at 17 to about 22, 23. I was riding with these outlaw bikers. I never joined the club, you know, but I was riding as a ride along with one of the most notorious outlaw bike clubs probably in the world at that time. You know.
So do you think that when you had success, you subconsciously sabotaged your success?
Absolutely, no question. In fact, I sabotaged it before it could I didn't get on stage with this mindset. I'm not a champion, and as a result, came in last. I won some contests, and then it was like the wrestling started, unconscious wrestling going on, you know. And the stronger of the two, which had been established for years, got hold, and that's what led me down that negative path. So yeah, I definitely sabotaged what was happening. I sabotaged the momentum. I never had this experience at last place because I just screwed it up, you know, or I couldn't get in shape because my mind wouldn't let me. But I completely sabotaged the path that I was on. Dropped out of the gym, went back a little bit here and there, kept myself in good shape just so I could fight good, you know. And but that was it for the next 4 to 5 years or so, and no bodybuilding, nothing. That was it. That was my lifestyle.
What snapped you out of it?
Hate to make it sound cliche, but a woman.
Okay.
That's all right.
It's all right.
And it could, it could have been a guy. Could have been anybody. It was someone out of the blue who saw something more, who believed in me above and beyond. Because I was really both my brother and I were really on this bad path. We had our own crew. We were breaking all sorts of laws. We were involved in all sorts of crap. But one of the two things that snapped me out of it, one was I began at that time, like the wrestling that happened earlier. I also began wrestling and vacillating with maybe this isn't for me, because the whole biker lifestyle, at least on that level, isn't what I anticipated. I thought, hey, here's a brotherhood. Here's guys just like me that I can relate to, and they can relate to me. We connect. We're comrades, right?
Yep.
And really, what it is at that level is organized crime at its nth degree, and organized in every way, shape, or form. Guns, drugs, prostitution, strip clubs, all of it, right? And even though I wasn't involved directly in any of that, I had my own thing going on. That because when you start hanging out with or spending time with, I mean, as they say, we become sort of a lot like the top 5 people that we hang out with, that we associate with, right? So I was the top 5 people I was hanging out with were outlaw bikers. So my moral compass began to decay rapidly. So I was doing things that I would never have done. So the thing that started helping wrestle with my mind, wrestling, was that I was brought up as a Catholic in a very religious home. My parents believed in me. They gave me good foundation. They gave me some spiritual belief systems that when I started seeing things happening within that lifestyle that was completely counter to this, it was like I couldn't shut it out. I couldn't block it out anymore. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't let it infect me anymore. I think if I had, I would have really gone down this path and probably be in jail or dead by now. So I started wrestling with that. And then at that time, and you know what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, it wasn't a teacher, but it was someone who believed in me, a young woman. Her name was Noelle. And Noelle believed in me. And she showed up, and she was smart. She was pretty. She was educated. She was going to college. None of my friends were going to college. Nobody. I was like, college? What? You want to do college, boy, right? Smack him in the head. So great gal. And she believed in me. And that belief helped escalate me, along with the wrestling with the morality of what type of lifestyle I was living. And so as a result, I just said, you know what? I think I'm going to get back in the gym. I started working out a little bit. I was still riding. It was almost like I was trying to be a bodybuilder again, but still being like I was a bodybuilder during the week and a biker on the weekends, Didn't make for very good workouts on a Monday. I can tell you that. Like every Monday, I'm like, why am I exhausted? Forget it. I can't do squats. Forget about it. So to a long story short, ultimately, there was a catalyst. There was an event that forced me to make up my mind, to get off the pot and the shit. It was like it's time. It was time. And I remember I was in the clubhouse at the biker clubhouse, and this was just an old warehouse with a rickety old bar made out of plywood and a bunch of crap. And I looking in the mirror, which was all dirty and broken. And I'm looking at myself. I'm looking around all these bikers. I'm like, is this what I become? Is this what I'm like? 23 years old. I look like I'm 40. I'm a mess. It's just disgusting. And then I'm looking at all these other guys, walking around with canes and just like the beard, lights hanging out of their beard. Just like it was like at that moment, I was like, what the hell? And I kid you not, guys. And again, and maybe to this day, I don't know if it was my own unconscious mind or my guardian angel or God. Something whispered in my ear and said, "You're done. Walk away. You're done. Walk away." And the second time I heard, I was confused. I looked around. I thought somebody was actually whispering in my ear.
Okay.
And so I looked around and I heard it again. And it was convincing because I was already there. I was already on that fence. I already been vacillating with this, get up, get out, you're done. And so I did. I started walking towards the door. And something happened that completely solidified the decision to walk away and never go back. was there was a shotgun, a short little Remington sawed-off shotgun, double barrel behind the bar, cocked, ready to go at a moment's notice, just in case somebody raided us or something. And somebody must have banged up against that bar, and because it was old and rickety, the thing popped off its perch behind the bar, hit the ground. Both barrels went off in the exact spot that I had been standing not 10 seconds before.
Whoa.
Just as I was opening the door, walk out. Unfortunately, a very dear friend of mine, his wife got caught with some of the shells, but she survived it. She made it out, but it was the whole place erupted. And I walked out that door and I never looked back. Never looked back. That was it. That was the catalyst. Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy.
So you decided to turn back to bodybuilding, and obviously
I turned back, and really, because it was like I was already kind of like delving in it a little bit. Like I said, during the week, on the weekends, I was a biker. And during the week, I was working out, training. So I didn't let my body go completely to pot. But I'd been stabbed, I've been drinking, I've been doing all sorts of drugs, cocaine, you name it. And so the first place was to really get back there, find Tony, reestablish a relationship with Tony Pandolfo, reestablish a relationship with Future Man Jim, which I was ashamed to go to. I wasn't during that biker period. I wasn't going to Future Man. In my mind, I let everybody down. I was becoming a champion, and now I'm garbage. Now I let myself go. I'm done. So I didn't go there. I just went to some other gym. So it was getting back into humbling myself and saying, hey, you know what? You got to suck it up. You got to get back in the good graces of Tony. You got to get back into Future Man Jim and start that process again. Thank God I had that, to be honest with you. Because bodybuilding, along with the belief of this one particular person and several other people, including my parents, that was my savior. I like to say I found God as a result of that, but I think I always had God in my mind and in my heart. So I can't say I found God, but I found some salvation in bodybuilding. And it took off pretty quickly from there.
Now, when you went back, did Tony break your balls for a little while? Did he give you a hard time?
He did. It was like those. Yeah, I had to earn it, man. Those coaches back then, they didn't give you much leeway. Bodybuilding coaches like Tony, like Vince Gironda, like Maholic, they were kind of like if you're in, you're in. If you're not in, don't even. And I wasn't in at that moment. I had to almost like when I first started training as a teenager. There, I had to earn my stripes. I had to prove to Tony, I'm here every day. I'm serious. I'm eating better. I'm going for it, man. And then he started to notice. But yeah, he didn't completely shun me by any means. But he was like, okay, I've seen this happen before. You're back. You'll be gone again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't willing to say, okay, let's get back to the drawing board. Let's get to work. We're going to make you Mr. America. That's it. There was none of that for a while. No. It took a bit to get back into it, man. Into his good graces, you might say.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, yeah, because like today you can't do that. I try to break balls a little bit to some guys, and it's a different mindset today. But that's what I experienced, and I understand what you went through. And a lot of what you're talking about resonates a lot with me personally. So I really appreciate your story and being so open. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think there's a few bodybuilders that have found their saving grace through bodybuilding, and I think it's one of the things that make us champions in many respects, because it wasn't easy. It wasn't handed to us. We weren't necessarily gifted with the best genetics in the world or lack of any struggle. I think the struggle is what makes us stronger, right? It's resistance. It's the perturbation, as it's called. The perturbation of tons and tons and layers of earth and rock is what creates a diamond out of coal. So if we don't have perturbation, we will never gain the internal, moral, physical strength to be able to become any sort of champion in the sport. So I can totally understand, not knowing your story, I can totally resonate that you have a story behind that's made you a champion.
Sean and I were talking before before you got on, and we were talking. We read your bio, and it was like, and I joked at first and said my dyslexia kicked in and said, don't even read this. So he thought I was joking. I'm like, no, I really am. I'm dyslexic. And I too, I didn't have to go on a yellow bus, but I was in a special needs class, and I was bullied. And I had some horrific things done to me, where I got beat up. And so I can relate a lot to your story. My high school wouldn't even allow me back in after an event where a kid took a pipe to my face, broke my nose, broke my jaw, broke my collarbone. And
it wouldn't allow you back in? What did you do to this kid?
Nothing. I know. They were more scared of him if they didn't allow him back in. So I was the easy target, and I had to have tutor come to my house, and I didn't experience graduation. I didn't experience my prom. And I joke with a lot of people that I went to and I did. This is the truth. I went to like 11 proms with other girls, and they're like, no, but nobody knew my story because I didn't go to my own prom, and I think I was trying to fulfill something that was missing. And same thing. I got into competing, I think, because I was trying to fill that gap, that void. The way you're talking, man, it's like, wow, it's like you're talking to me right now. It's like,
yeah, I mean, it's so it's interesting because I do a lot of speaking, a lot of motivational stuff, but also personal development training, corporations and stuff like that. And it's just like my story is like 99% of the people in the audience don't have a story like mine, but they relate to it in some way. They had their own struggle. They had their own trauma. I'm finding as I work with people with trauma that 90% of us had something we coded as trauma. It may not be, childhood abuse. It may not be whatever we think of as trauma, but it could be anything. It's my best friend calling me retard, saying, I reject you. I didn't want you. That's coded as trauma,
Absolutely,
So I think a lot of people do. And it's interesting, Vinny, because same thing, man. You can imagine as junior in high school with a Harley Davidson, I finally got into a fight with a gym teacher, beat the guy up, and they're like, Mr. Terwilliger, what are we going to do with it? I said, I'm going to make it easy. I quit. So I left. But I did the same thing. I went to like 3 or 4 different proms with different girls.
Not only did I go to 11 proms, but I actually went to
11
high schools. I went to 3 high schools, and the first high school I went to, they actually closed down, and I got in on an art scholarship. And then the second high school, this kid, my uncle pulled me aside and he said, "Do not cause a problem for your mother and father. Do not fight." I was like, "Okay, I won't fight." And this one kid would flick me in the back of my ear every day. And until one day I couldn't take it anymore, and I took a history book to his head repeatedly.
Jeez.
And turns out that his father was the high school was St. Al's High School in Jersey City, and the first 2 floors were up to 8th grade, and then the second 2 floors was high school. And I didn't know that his father was Mr. Wilkins, was the gym teacher and history teacher at the grammar school. And he comes up and blasts me in the face. We start fighting. So I can totally relate to you.
Gym teacher, another fight with a gym. What the hell? We're gonna have to put a survey out to bodybuilders. Raise your hand if you've ever beat up a gym teacher.
Oh, he beat me up.
It's so funny though, because think about it. You think we would relate to gym teachers a little bit. We spend the rest of our lives in the gym.
Yeah.
Well, but gym teachers were different.
I had just taken a history book to his son's head. So he had one up on me. He just came in and sucker punched me. And I remember, I think my sisters are listening right now because they watch all the podcasts. And I remember it was chaos. The whole school erupted, right? And I come out and, my sister Charlotte is like, "What's going on?" And she sees my face. I'm all bloody. Yeah, it was a mess. I
Unbelievable.
Stress to my parents that you're talking about.
Oh, my poor parents. I'm going to tell you, man, between they had my parents were 40 in their late 40s, 46, 47 years old when they had twins. They'd already had 4 kids. And every one of them were hellions. My older brother, forget who became a cop. He's a police officer, or was. My sister, they were all hellions. And then just as I think my dad is like ready to say, I had already thought, that's enough. He has twins.
Jeez.
And so I think we got away with a lot of stuff because of that, because they'd already had enough. By the time we were 5 years old, they were 50, and 50 back then is different than 50 today.
Yeah.
I mean, 50 back then was kind of old, you know. It was like you didn't want to have twins, 5-year-old twins at 50 back then, you know. So we got away with a lot of stuff as a result of that, man.
And the same way, my sisters are 17, 14, and 11 years older than me, and my parents were almost 40 when they had me. So our stories are very close.
Our stories are my sisters are all older than me. I've got one that's now, in their late 70s, and then all the way down. The youngest one is 12 or 14 years older than me. So very much the same story, man.
Funny.
Isn't that crazy? Yep.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah, that's funny. And it's funny because earlier we were saying, well, I wanted to do these shows that Tom Terwilliger did, and I never knew, like, years later. I remember when you and I met for the first time. We were on stage at a show, and I couldn't believe this is like a normal dude. He's talking to me. He's a god to me. I see him in the magazines, and he's on, all these shows, and I'm like, Tom's talking to me, and I couldn't believe, like, yeah, Vin, I can't wait to go to Night of Champions, and I'm like, he just said my name. I remember that like it was yesterday. I go, this guy knows my fucking name.
Wow, man. No, I remember you. You were one of those guys that were up and coming, man. In fact, I think we must have covered one of your events.
You did, yeah, because
on Muscle Sport USA.
I won the overall at the Suburban.
Mm-hmm. No, we always covered the Suburban. Yeah.
Yeah, and I trained a lot with Steve Stone.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve was a mentor, if you will. Very logical guy.
Oh,
and a good sense of humor.
Yep.
And I love Steve was one of the guys who taught me about hard leg training.
Mm.
And I watched Steve squat like 5 or 6 plates. I'm like, how's he doing this? I can't do that. And Steve was a good guy. And
I had the misfortune of training with Steve a few times, and it was always hell. And one time I had discovered a new routine called hundreds. Right? I don't know if you ever done hundreds. Yeah.
Wait, before you go any further, wasn't that the guy from California who was doing 100 reps?
Yeah, there was a couple of guys that were doing it, but I remember being introduced through Maholic was volume. They would do 100 sets. Him and John Defendez would do 100 sets for like back or even biceps. Legs, easily 100 sets. I mean, it would be 3 hours of leg training. It was crazy. I don't know how John, still a dear friend. I don't know how John did it. I just don't know. I mean, I couldn't have done it, But the hundreds were, you would do 100 reps, pick a weight that you could comfortably do 20 with, you know what I mean? Squatting, let's just say 225, right? And 100 reps. You got to get 100 reps with it, And it was brutal. So that when I trained with Steve, the last time I trained legs with Steve, he wanted to go heavy because I've trained heavy with him before, and it was always brutal. And I have small joints. I'm not a heavy guy. My heaviest bench was 405. Heaviest squat was 500, but those were like anomalies. That wasn't the weight I was training with, And Steve was freaking strong. And every time I trained with him, he wanted to train heavy. So I'm like, hey, Steve, hold on. Let's do something else. I've just discovered some new routine. I think you're going to love it, right? He freaking hated it because he was so conditioned to doing low reps, heavy weight. Doing 100 reps, finally got the bastard. I was like, I got you son of a bitch.
Now, Tom, let's just educate the audience a little bit on who he was. And,
yes.
Because a lot of people don't know who he was. Steve Stone, many years competing, and he became the expediter at all of the New York shows.
Yes,
and
he was
at the Mr.
Yeah, and he won. I think he won the light heavyweight division at either the juniors or the USA one year. He never turned pro, but he was good. And I remember he was on the cover of a magazine. He was dating a gal too. I did a cover with her on Muscular Development magazine. His girlfriend at the time was Sharon Marvel. That's right. And him and Sharon dated for quite a while. They were an item, and they were both great bodybuilders. And I had never met Steve. And I remember when the TV show Muscle Sport USA was picked up by Fox Sports. Now we were on Madison Square Garden Network for the first 6 years or something of the show, and it was different then. It was different. It was like we had a special guest on. We had Dr. Robert Goldman, who's one of the top doctors. I mean, the guy is amazing, right? We had a whole bunch of and different. It was a different format. And then when Fox Sports picked up Muscle Sport USA, which was fantastic, that Fox Sports Net would pick us up, it changed. I had to start wearing the blue blazer and the tie, and the whole mic with the Fox Sports, and it was really competition coverage, because that's what Fox Sports was doing. It was competition coverage, so we had to have a color man. I was like the anchor. We had to have a color guy, right? And so Paul Goldberg, who was one of the producers, said, "We've got a guy. Love you to meet him. I think he'd be a good balance." And I'd never met Steve, but Paul was bragging he won this contest and that contest. And he drove out from where he was living. I think it was upstate New York, White Plains or something, to Long Island to my gym. I had a gym called Maximum Health and Fitness in Long Island. I had two of those. And he came out. And I'm going to be honest with you. Here I was like, I had already won the Nationals. But I was nervous to meet this guy. I was like, he's got a great reputation. He's good looking. He's like, he's going to steal the limelight from me, man. This guy's good. And I loved him right out of the gate. I loved the guy. And we just had such a great balance between the two of us. He was great color. I was more of an anchor. And it worked out fantastic. So Steve was the perfect balance there. Blonde, great looking guy. One of the things that I loved the most about Steve, that he was about my height, maybe even a little shorter. Guys that were 6'5", I would have been like, no, we're not hiring a guy that's 6'5". Ain't happening. I ain't doing this up here. So you can see the ego was firmly intact at that time, and Steve, and again, just for your audience, Steve was indeed, a quick story about Steve. We were at some show in Jersey. It might have been a national championship or something. And I remember we had to be on camera, right, during the intermission. It was like, and we had to hustle back. And we're hustling back. The intermission just started. We're not there. And it was like, oh my God, everybody loved Steve. They knew who I was, but they loved Steve. And it was just like everybody was stopping. And he would stop and give advice, say hello. He was the most generous guy with his time as anyone I've ever known. So it took, ultimately we were late to get on camera, so we got in a little trouble. But it was always hell getting through an audience with Steve because of that reason. And like you said, Vinny, he was one of the best expediters, because he respected, but he had a firm hand on expediting competitors backstage, even at the Olympia. He could get some people in the lineup. Let's go. We got to get going. There's a time. There's a clock, right? He would get them moving, get them going, and help people out. He'd even put oil on people and help them out. And ultimately, he loved that. He loved doing that. And ultimately,
yeah, I know.
Wow.
You guys were asking earlier, so he actually won the 1990 North American Championships, took first place as a light heavy.
North American, that was it. Yep. And he died backstage. He had a congenital heart issue, and literally putting oil on a competitor, helping a competitor backstage at the Olympia. Wow. He died on the spot. Wow, that was years ago, and I still, man, I miss that guy. I miss him. God rest his soul. Yeah, so that was Tom, Steve. He was a character.
So let's get back to you here for a minute. So you won the 86 Nationals in a stacked class. So I see Mike Ashley, Aaron Baker. You win that. Did you walk into that thinking you had it, or were you kind of questioning your placements a little bit?
Well, as soon as I saw Mike Ashley backstage, I didn't think I had it. I was like, oh man, because I knew Mike from Long Island. I knew how good he was, and I knew he had exactly what I didn't have: abs. Mike Ashley had some of the best abs in bodybuilding at the time, and I had crap abs. I was as lean as anyone, but I never had good genetic. I couldn't hold my own with these new physique competitors, because they all got these incredible abs, right? It's like a must. If you don't have them, don't even get on stage. And I knew he had those abs, but he was also arms, back. His back was amazing. but I had the momentum. I had taken 2 years before, I guess it was in '84, I had taken third. That was a surprise because I got on that stage. I had gone down to New Orleans. It was in New Orleans, my first nationals, and I'd gone down there to prep with a couple of guys. My training partner back in New York had taken the light heavyweight division at the USA one year, and he had these two guys that were medical students at Tulane University down in New Orleans, and they were going to get me dry. They were going to get me ready. So I flew down a week before, and I'm being honest with you, I was ready to win the show the day I got to New Orleans. I was dry. I was lean. I was 196 pounds. By the time they got done with me, I dropped down to 186 pounds, and I couldn't even open the day of the show. I couldn't even open my hand. I was cramping so bad. I was like, "Oh my God!" In the audience, the outside, it was an outside bandstand looking over the stadium, and hot. So I'm already dehydrated. I don't want anything to do with these guys. They're over there. Don't even sit with me. I really felt like they screwed me up. Now I'm no victim. I allowed it to happen, but I didn't want any part of these guys after that. And so I had nobody there with me to help me. So I stand up. They call light heavyweights backstage. I stand up and my right quad cramps. I bend the leg, the hamstring cramped really bad. Then the other leg cramped. I went tumbling down 6 flights of stairs.
Oh, jeez.
Right? With my bag. I'm like tumbling down and every body part is just cramping up. So these guys were good enough to come running over, like 4 of them. They came running over, picked me up, carried me backstage. So I'm being carried. I see JJ Marsh. I see Rich Gaspari. I see these guys, and they're pumping up and getting oiled, and I'm getting carried backstage. I'm like freaking out here. And so the guy's massaging my leg. And he's like, and all of a sudden it locks up again. He's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. So I grab him by the shirt. I go, did you see that beer and hot dog stand out there? I said, go get me a beer and a hot dog. So he runs out to get the beer, the hot dog. He comes back. He hands me the bun. I'm like, where's the hot dog? He's like, I threw it out. You don't want a hot dog. It's too much sodium. I'm like, I need that hot dog. So I get it out of the trash. I pound the hot dog. I drink the beer. It was just enough to get me up. I walked out on stage, no oil. I mean, the lineup was ready to go. That was it. I had to get in line. So I got online. So taking third in that contest was, and I could hardly throw. I mean, everything I threw was cramp. I couldn't hold anything more than just a second or so. So taking third in that first nationals under those circumstances was a shocker. But it's one of those things where once you take third, and you know this, Vinny, you know this, guys, that once you take something like a third, now you're in it to win it. Now it's like I gotta win this thing now. I got a taste of it. I got a taste of what it's like to be in that top 5, and I'm going to win it next time. So the next year, 85, was also interesting. It wasn't that bad because I'd gotten it under control. I knew my body. I knew what it needed to do to get dry, and I felt like I was good and ready to go. But then in steps Phil Williams, and Phil Williams was. The guy he had a back. He had a back that was just unbelievable. Do you know Phil? You know who Phil Williams is, don't you?
I never met him, but I know.
Yeah, Phil was great. He, like me, he didn't really make a big mark as a pro, but he was really good. And it was interesting, Vinny, and you'll get a kick out of this because during the pre-judging, right? I mean, we're both ready. I'm glancing over at him. He's glancing over at me. We didn't really know each other at all, but so the pre-judging, the light heavyweights come out. They call me and Phil, boom, whatever our numbers were, number 14, number 24. We come out alone, the 2 of us. That's like never happens. There's always a 5 or 6 guys, right? And they're going to compare them all. They had us run through our mandatories and our quarter turns. Nobody else out there. They put us back and never again pulled us back out, ever. It was like, so we knew it was 1 and 2. It was 1 and 2. And I didn't know which way it was going to go. And so I was prepared. I had this posing routine. I kind of got known for the posing routines. And so I had one that was really dramatic. And I think it might put me over the top, because I knew he was good. I knew it was going to be tight. And I'll never forget it because a gentleman, remember Moses Maldonado at all?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, Moses won the light heavyweight division like in '83, I think. And then went to the world championship and lost to a German came back and competed in the Nationals again. He wanted to win the Nationals again to be able to qualify for the World Championship again, to win that and turn pro. It was a mistake for him to come back. So the year that I took third, he took fourth. The year that I took second to Phil Williams, he took third. He was right behind me. I think he took third. Might have been Aaron Baker. But anyway, Moses comes up to me, and I barely knew Moses because we were both New Yorkers. And I was always rooting for Moses. I loved his physique. I thought he was great. I always cheered for him, always. And he comes up to me and messed with my head. It was like the end of I was like, we're ready, almost ready to go back out. The finals. He comes up to me, he says, man, you looked really good today. It was so close between you and Phil. He goes, unfortunately, and this is before I go out for the final pose, right? He goes, unfortunately, I was talking to the judges. You lost by 1 point.
Oh,
I was practically livid. I'm like, you just robbed me of an opportunity. It doesn't mean I would have won. I still would have lost. But I would have went out there with just a little bit more fight in me. You know what I mean?
right.
It was just like, you don't do that. That wasn't good sportsmanship at all. So I wound up taking second to Phil by 1 point, which was pretty cool, you know. And then the next year, so I had the momentum going into '86. But then again, when I saw Mike Ashley, and Mike Ashley was good friends with Tony Pandolfo, my mentor, who I happened to train with for that last Nationals. Because, and again, I don't want us to go long, and I know I tend to get long-winded, but remember that demon I wrestled with as a teenager when I was a bodybuilder and then became a biker? That demon showed up again. And after taking third and second with that momentum going into the Nationals, the demon showed up and said, that's not who you are. I mean, he kept ringing my bell and whispering in my ear, that's not who you are. That's not who you are. You can't do that. You're not going to win this thing. Why don't you just quit? Why don't you just give up? Forget it. That's not who you are. You're this guy. And I had a new girlfriend. We were partying and hanging out. And it was just, I couldn't get my head into it. So I called Tony Pandolfo out of the blue. I hadn't seen him in a year or so. And I said, Tony, you know what I'm up against? I said, I took third, I took second, the momentums, but I can't get my head into it, man. I said, I'm really struggling. He didn't say anything. He just said, be in the gym 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll go from there. And he beat the crap out of me, man. And that was it. I trained with him for the next 12, I guess it was about 12 weeks or so. We trained together for that contest. And he was good friends with Mike Ashley. He never once mentioned that Mike was going to be in the show. And then I see Mike weighing in. I'm like, son of a bitch. I thought I had this wrapped up. Now Mike Ashley shows up. I'm like, oh, God. So I wound up winning against Mike anyway. But like you said, it was a pretty stacked. Aaron Baker was great. J.J. Marsh, Mr. USA, he ultimately turned pro. I think that whole lineup turned pro within a year or two. So
those guys were amazing.
Yeah, I still consider myself fortunate. I consider myself fortunate to have beaten Mike on that day. I really do. Yeah. I think the momentum helped, quite frankly. But then again, I look at the pictures. Mike's symmetry wasn't that great. His lines weren't terrific. He had great muscularity, but he was lacking a couple of things. But I still think on any given day, he could have beat me.
You had that natural X frame, though. You know, you had that X frame, shoulders, waist, flaring quads, your diamond calves.
That definitely helped because I was not the biggest guy. I mean, I think I won the light heavyweight nationals at 188 pounds. I gave away like 10 pounds. I could have been 10 pounds. I always struggled to put a lot of weight and a lot of muscle on, you know, so I had to be refined. But it wasn't enough. Once I turned pro, it wasn't enough. It was enough to win the national, but it wasn't. My best showing at a pro level qualified me 2 years in a row or 1 year after. Was the Niagara Pro Championship. That qualified. I took third in that against Sonny Schmidt. Remember Sonny Schmidt?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. God rest his soul.
Oh, man, that guy was thick. And Albert Beckles. Albert Beckles won. Sonny was second. I was third. And to compete, I got to be honest with you, man. Again, you talk about like, this is Tom Terwilliger. He's talking to me. It was like, Albert Beckles. I'm competing against Albert Beckles. It was like, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, I mean, he was like, holy crap. And I wound up beating Albert at one of the Night of the Champions. I competed in like 3 of those. Never did really well. 10th, 7th, 6th. But I beat him 1 year and I was like, oh my God, I beat Albert Beckles. That was enough for me.
And
Unfortunately, that was enough for me.
didn't Sonny Schmidt end up winning one of the Masters Olympia?
He did.
I think he did.
94, 93. Yeah, I think you're right,
Right?
Vin.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've got funny stories about Sonny Schmidt. After Olympia, one of the Olympias, we got to be good friends. Me, Milos Sharshev, and
Yeah.
Sonny kind of hung out. We were like the three stooges, you might say. You know, we always hung out on the Grand Prix. And there's 7 contests on this Grand Prix tour after the Mr. Olympia, and you're on a bus 90% of the time. There's contests on Wednesdays. You know, because you had to do these contests. They did contests not on a weekend. It was like a Wednesday and then a Saturday and then a Monday. It was crazy. And so we were hanging out. And Sonny, and again, man, how many times do I have to say God rest his soul? You know, because Sonny's gone too. He passed away. We're hanging out. It was like Sonny was taking second to Vince Taylor every contest, like the first 4 contests. Vince, Sonny, Vince, Sonny, Vince, Sonny, right? And then we got to Spain. Something happened in Spain, and I think it had something to do with scoring something from a dealer of some kind that you would put in a pipe and smoke. Sonny got a hold of some of this stuff, and that was it, man. That was it. I remember we had to get on a bus, and there's like 20 of us, right? We got to get on this bus, and organizing 20 bodybuilders. Can't even imagine what Wayne D'Amelio was up against doing all this, right? I mean, it's just a mess, and we couldn't find Sonny. He's like, he's got to get on the bus. We got to go. We're on a deadline. So nobody could find him. So Milos and I went looking for him. We went into the men's room, and we see these plumes of smoke coming out from over the stall. We're like, oh my God, we opened the stall, and there's Sonny smoking a pipe of hash. And I was like, that was it. He went from 2nd to 4th to 5th to 7th. It's like, just kept dropping in every contest, man.
Oh my God.
But he was a great guy, and just I'll never forget him. I love that guy, man. Yeah,
They're great stories.
Great. Yeah, I hope he doesn't mind.
He's probably laughing. He's probably wishing he was able to do it again.
Yeah. So it was funny too because he was Samoan, and you could hardly understand what he was saying. What would always come out? I mean, he'd be like, "fucking." It was like all you could understand was the word "fucking." I'm like, all right.
That's funny. That's funny. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, your website, and you were saying a little earlier before about what you do, and
Yeah. Thank you. I'm working. I coach. I don't personal train anymore, but I do a lot of coaching, mostly in the area of mindset. I work with entrepreneurs. I have a few that I work with that are trauma victims. I mean, true, like some serious trauma that I work with. And all of this, everything I do in the realm of mindset, success, and achievement training it centers around our physiology. And for me, that's the most important thing. I won't work with someone if they're not ready to or willing to engage and create rapport, I call it, with their body. Because a lot of times they don't. And trauma victims, for example, are very disconnected from their body. The vagus nerve that attaches the gut and the heart runs up into the larynx and the ears, sends messages to the brain. And if you're not connected, that vagus nerve turns off, and you're always in a state of fight or flight. You're always in the sympathetic nervous system. So we've got to get back into the body, reconnect with it, and reestablish rapport with the vagus nerve and the rest of the body. So that's the kind of work I do, and I work with executives and entrepreneurs quite a bit. And I'm also working these days. My wife is a epigenetic coach. So she does a lot in the nutrition, peptides, and all these different hormone areas, and does blood work and blood tests and stuff. So we have a site now that has nothing to do with entrepreneurial coaching, but it has something more with the anti-aging approach that we're taking with a lot of our clients. Because a lot of our clients are older. Mm-hmm. They're in there like us. They're in their 40s, 50s, even their 60s. I'm 64 now, and so I relate to that. I'm more in tune with that. So we work with them, and we've got it. I mean, if you're listening and you want to like kind of find out what's going on, why your energy level isn't where it should be, why you're feeling lethargic, why you're starting to feel old, I hear yourself saying, I must be getting old, or getting old sucked. If you're saying any of those things, you need to start working on this right away. So you can go to a website we have, and it's a quiz. that you take. It's very quick, very easy. It only takes about 2 minutes to go through this quiz called the Vitality Score. You can go to vitalityscore.com, and that's going to run you through these questions that'll already start the wheels turning. I didn't think of that. That's interesting. Why would they ask that question? And then we do at the end of it, we give you your number one energy blocker along with a whole bunch of other suggestions. We can work together from there, but that's of tremendous value. So if you're listening and you want to go there, vitalityscore.com, or you go to my website, maxmindset.com. And we got a lot of stuff there as well.
And what's your social media platforms on Facebook?
Mostly Facebook. It's just Tom Terwilliger. That's it. Yep. And there's a couple of them, but you'll know. I'm not the Tom Terwilliger with the big white beard. He's a friend of mine. He's a police officer. He used to be anyway. And we've connected. He's a great friend because of the name. We connected. But he's got this big white beard, man. You never know it. He's only in his 40s, but. So I'm not that guy. I'm not that Tom Terwilliger, but I'd love for you to connect and say hello and ask any questions you want. But you've certainly got some great mentors here with Sean and with Vinny. I mean, it's got to be today, notwithstanding, this has to be a tremendously informative podcast.
This is great.
Today is the exception. Today's the exception. Don't judge the podcast based on this performance.
No, this has been great. This is awesome.
There'll be a part 2.
Yeah.
All right.
So Sean, Tom, you got me all rattled up. Thank you so much for your time, and it's been a pleasure. Is there anything else you want to plug real quick before we get going?
Well, the Vitality Score, I would definitely encourage you to do that. And the other thing I would encourage you to do, without plugging anything, is think of yourself as a mentor as well. There's someone out there that could use your support, your smile. Over this course of COVID and the shutdowns and all the stuff that we've experienced over these last couple of years, there's been so much mental illness as a result of this. And you can help with that just with a smile, just with a handshake, just with a greeting. And in the gym, be as friendly as possible. I know some of these gyms, there's so many teenagers in there right now. It can make me angry. It's like, you're on the machine. I want to get on the machine. But I'm so grateful they're there, working on their bodies and supporting their minds in the gym environment, man. It couldn't be any better. So do what you can, folks, to stay calm, to stay cool, to relax, breathe, greet others, and know that you have the power. You have the power to change somebody else's life as well as yours. So that would be the one thing. Just reach out to anyone you can. Try not to get angry. Forget the road rage crap. They're having a worse day than you are. So let them go.
Amen.
And let it go.
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much. Love your story. Love your message. And we appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming
You
on.
too. Sean, Vinny, I love you guys. God bless. God bless everybody watching. And get out there and be high achievers. We all have it in us, man.
Tom, absolute pleasure, because you made my day back in the day watching the muscle sport. And for everybody watching and listening, thank you so much. Next Wednesday, making his very first podcast debut, which is surprising, Chris Faldo from Hawaii. And also, hopefully early next week, we'll be doing a roundtable when the Masters Olympia list will be announced. And knock on wood, Vinny will be the first topic on there. Everyone have a great night.
But
I'll be praying that you're in that, man. I love to see you in that. I can't imagine you're not going to be. So
thank you. Well, crossing my fingers.
You got it, guys. God bless. Be safe.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.